Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Amherst Neighbors. Today we're having a presentation on hospice, and we are very fortunate to have Dina Stander. And you're on the board of directors, is that correct, Dina?
I am.
And Kemper Carlson, who's the clinical director, is correct? And Ashley Taus, who is, what is your official title, Ashley?
I am the marketing and special events coordinator for the Fischer Home, and I sort of just help facilitate these outreach opportunities for the Fischer Home.
Oh, great. Well, we're really thrilled to have everybody here today. My name is Sandy Roth, and I am both on the board of directors of Fischer Home, of Amherst Neighbors, and I am also on the program committee. And we've already had Dina do two wonderful programs for us, one on home funerals and green burial. And so when the program committee got together, we thought that the hospice program would be just a real natural for our members, very informative and something that I think everybody at some point needs to have some information on. I would like to just say that I have been a volunteer at the Fischer Home for 8 years now. As part of my retirement, I decided to volunteer my time there. And I think, you know, there's many different forms of hospice, and we'll be learning about all of those. But the Fischer Home, from my perspective, is a really unique, wonderful place. And I'm so glad that they'll be here to talk about hospice. But one little anecdote that I would like to say about my experience at the Fischer Home relates to their little buzzer ringtone box. Around the Fischer Home are these little boxes. Any resident, there are 9 rooms there, at any time can hit a little button, a call button, and it buzzes around the entire Fischer Home. So it means that that person in that patient in that room needs some help, needs some assistance, needs something. And they're communicating to us, please come to my room. And so I've been there, 7 or 8 years now. And one of my jobs that I did was I was the assistant cook. I really learned a lot about cooking with an expert cook there. And in the kitchen of the hospice home, there is a little call box. And as part of my wonderful training, I did like eight sessions of training. I was told that, you know, when someone is in hospice, when someone is in care, one of the most important things for their care is to have somebody respond to them when they have a need. It's just, you know, incredible how important that is. I know my mother was in a facility that didn't come very quickly. I know how distressing it was to her. So I would say in the 8 years that I've been there, I've probably had the ringtone go off probably, I don't know, 100 times or so. And honestly, I never once got to the room before someone beat me to it. So the buzzer would go off, the ringtone would go off, and I immediately would tell the chef, I have to leave. You're in the middle of your cooking. You no longer have a sous chef. I would be gone. And I would walk down to the rooms as fast as I could go, and somebody was already there. And that just says volumes about hospice, and especially the hospice of the Fischer Home, of the kinds of care that's given. And so it's a real pleasure for me today to kind of lead off with the presentation. Joanna Walter is our Zoom host. I'm the program host. We'll ask that everybody, there's Joanna, mute yourselves during the presentation. We found that what works best is if we save questions and answers to the end. We will have an open forum for questions and answers. But if you do have a question or a comment that you would like to make, you can, in the chat room, you can send it to me. You can send a chat. I'll write down your question or comment. And at the end of the presentation, when we open up for question and answer, I'll start off by any questions or comments that came to me. I'm going to let each person introduce themselves and maybe tell a little about their role and something about themselves with respect to the hospice of the Fischer Home. And also remind people that Amherst Neighbors is a nonprofit. If you go to our webpage, there is a little button that says donate, and we greatly appreciate any donations that you can make. We charge nothing to members. We charge nothing for our programs. And, you know, ongoing donations are an ongoing part of our existence. So if you could give something, we'd appreciate it greatly. Who from the Fischer home is going to go lead off?
I think
Kemper?
that's going to be me.
Okay, Dina. And Dina, as you can see, is in her car. So this is like a history-making presentation. And somebody's in their car, but she's not driving. She's parked
No.
somewhere in Cambridge.
Safely parked in Cambridge, where it is a beautiful sunny day. And I am so delighted to be able to be here with you from, you know, even on the road. This is kind of fun. And what we came from the Fischer home to talk to you about, really, we want to answer your questions about hospice. What is hospice? How do you get signed up for hospice? How do you know if you're ready for hospice? Can you graduate from hospice if for some reason you continue to live? All of these are good questions, and many, many more. But I want to start just sort of dovetailing off of Sandy's story. You guys have all met me a little bit now, people who've come to the other presentations I've done, and you have a sense that I work in end-of-life care. But the hospice of the Fischer home is a large part of how that happened for me, because my mother-in-law, who had lung cancer and was dying kind of quickly in Los Angeles, around the time when the Fischer home opened. And we were kind of waiting for the Fischer home to be really opened. And then I had to wait until I could talk my mother-in-law into leaving her apartment in Santa Monica and coming here where we could better care for her, because we were all flying to Los Angeles in sort of a tag team for her care, which was absurd. So we got her there, and she got into her room and sort of settled in. And I was going to go run an errand and pick something up at the store for her. And she called me back in and she said, "Dina, I do know that it took you 4 months to talk me into doing this, and I can't thank you enough." She felt safe and cared for. And it was a quiet place. And there were beautiful birds out her window, all of these things. And you know, at this time, the Fischer home was only having resident care in the residence and not in people's homes in the community. We've expanded so that we can provide care in people's own homes. But learning about that, you know, that's where I learned about hospice. My mother-in-law was dying, and she was held so gently and with such respect for her personhood in the context of the hospice house. And as her family, we were welcome there. We could come anytime. There weren't, you know, well, there wasn't COVID, so there were less rules, but we were really welcomed. And my children were welcomed there, which was kind of an unexpected benefit, because they could feel comfortable there and safe and play in the yard or be in the house and read quietly, and it was fine. So that was my introduction to hospice, and really got me interested in, as communities, how do we provide safe spaces and adequate care for people at end of life. And I became curious. I became a hospice volunteer, and eventually, many years later now, 15 or so years later, I'm on the board of the Fischer home. Really proud to be on the board of the Fischer home, because I think that the Fischer home is a hospice organization that is able to meet the needs of the community, whether people need care in the residence or care in their homes, really adeptly. I want to say, if I need to, it's my plug for the organization. So I am going to invite you to tell us stories about your own experiences with hospice if you want to, and to invite you when Kemper's done with her presentation about, you know, how to access hospice, invite you to tell us stories and ask any questions. And with that, I will pass the baton to Kemper.
Thanks, Dina. And it's nice to see a few familiar faces on the screen, some people that I knew were going to be here and some people who I didn't. So it's nice to see you all. So my name is Kemper Carlson. I'm the recent hire as the clinical director at the Fischer home. My background has been in the sciences, and I found my way here through a friend who was dying, and he passed here, and I was so impressed with just exactly how Dina explained it, just sort of the care and the grace that is here. And so I said, oh, I better volunteer. So I volunteered for a year, and then partway through that, I was like, oh, I got to be a nurse and work here. So I went back to school and I got my nursing degree, and I only applied here. So it was good that they hired me because I didn't have another plan. And I was here on the floor for a year, and then I was in the community for a couple of years as a community nurse. And then I came back to do quality assurance in the house here during COVID, and then had the opportunity to apply for the clinical director position. And I love my job. I love working here. I love my whole team. And that's really kind of a theme that for a lot of people here and also on hospice is it's the team approach. It's that we're not on our own doing these things. It's kind of more of a European model where we're all talking together, the social work and the spiritual and the medical director and the family and, you know, the CNAs, like everybody is involved with the care plan. And it includes not just the individual who's on hospice with us, but the care plan includes the family. So it includes caring for the family. So I'm grateful every day that I get to do the work I do. And part of it is because of that model. So, you know, it's where to jump off. So yeah, sort of the team approach, and hospice is changing. And originally, you know, some time ago, people sort of looked at hospice like you're in your last couple of weeks, and we've tried everything and nothing's working, and you know, you're really down to your last weeks or few days. And as time has gone on, that people have discovered that hospice includes this extra care, a nursing visit and a CNA visit and someone to talk to and somebody to discuss supporting you getting other care in, or financial concerns, or any of the things going on. It's now we're having people come on hospice who are much earlier in their diagnosis because the word is spreading. And I think that's great because people need care much before, you know, they're down to their last few days. And there are some very specific things that make you hospice eligible. And it's not just that you only have 6 months to live. We have people who are on hospice who have been with us for a year or more. So we can get more into those details with the question and answer later, but just to let you know, you don't have to wait. And you don't have to wait for your physician. You a family member or yourself or a loved one who's caring for you can call on your behalf and say, hey, I think I'm seeing something here. You know, can I get a referral for hospice? And yeah, we'll do that. And we'll get all the data that we need to get from your physician or the hospital, whatever, and we'll go through the things and do a question and answer and determine whether you're hospice eligible. And sometimes people aren't. But they still need care. And so often what we will do, we'll refer people to some local home care agencies or Highland Elders, you may know that organization, or some of the neighbors organizations will say, hey, have you checked in with your, Leverett neighbors or wherever you live, to try and support people before they're hospice eligible. And then, we're here for when they need us. And some of our team includes, of course, the nurse and the CNA. but also includes our Masters of Social Work and spiritual counselors, non-denominational. She's there to, or whoever is in the position, but this is a standard hospice team that includes, in any hospice you go to, a nurse, a CNA, social worker, spiritual counselor, and a bereavement counselor who will follow the family if they're interested for 13 months after their loved one has passed. And also we have, of course, our medical director and our wonderful volunteer crew. Right now, the Fischer Home has 75 volunteers. Most of them have gone through the full training, but we also have sort of a short training that's available for people who want to just jump in and help, but not necessarily do direct patient interface. So let's see, hospice, it's called the Hospice Benefit. And that's the box from your insurance that covers hospice, covers the nursing, covers the care team, covers the hospital bed or medications or any other equipment that's needed. Of course, that's either at home or at our 9-bed facility. And if you're at home, the hospice benefit does not cost you anything. It comes out of your Medicare or another type of insurance you might have that would cover the hospice benefit. And in fact, Mass Health also has a hospice benefit. So that's important to know for some of our folks that are, have less than others of us. So that's a little bit about what, as far as coverage goes. There's some more nuanced pieces to it, but we can discuss that later. And at the Fischer Home, we are a 9-bed facility. We have been here since 2004. It has a beautiful beginning story, which is that there was a hospice group going around saying, we're a nonprofit hospice and we're community-based, but we are looking for some place to land because there's not very many sort of places that people can go if they're not able to be at home or don't want to go to a skilled nursing facility. And there was a home here of 6 beds. It was a women's home and called the Fischer Home. And they were starting to realize that the dynamics and the demographics were changing, and there just wasn't as many calls for women to find a room to share in a group home. And so these two groups connected, and the Fischer Home organization basically donated the building and an endowment to this nonprofit band of people. And that's how we became Hospice of the Fischer Home. And through the years, there has always been huge gifts that have come to us in so many different ways. People really pour their hearts into supporting us. So thank you all who've done that and been on our board and been volunteers, of course. So I kind of wonder if now is a good time to just see if there are some questions. And is there something, Dina, that you think I should cover besides that?
I don't think you left anything out that's really important. I'm really interested in what people's questions are and having lots of time to sort of explore that. So I think that was a good overview.
I just thought of one more thing.
Yeah.
We recently had, and this is something that's really beautiful that we do here. We recently had a memorial service for the people who have passed. I believe it's before 6 months ago and going back into the previous year. And our bereavement and psychosocial team do a memorial so that the staff can have space to remember the people. We also have a memorial service that's open to all of the friends and family and the staff for all of the patients who have passed. But we've recently done one that was just really for the staff. And it was very moving because we get very close to these people who we care for, of course. Yeah. And we were all of us were reflecting on, it's really the little things. It's the showing up when the call bell is going off. It's remembering that person likes to have, warm milk and a snickerdoodle at 10 o'clock at night and never forget, it's like, it's those little things that really make a big difference. And most recently, I go walking with my girlfriends, you know, after work on the weekends, and I'm always telling stories about the beautiful things that happen at Fischer Home. And there's some hard things, of course, it's hospice, but some really beautiful things. And one was a gentleman came to us who had a very dear, dear care team that had been following him for a long time. He had no family, really no close friends except for his care team, very beloved by them. And, you know, finally he's ready for hospice, and he comes here and he settles in, and he's having trouble settling in. And he's getting up and getting his jacket and walking down the hallway and saying, well, I have to go feed the bird. And, you know, she needs me. And, you know, he was a little confused and weren't really sure whether there really was a bird or not. And finally, after a few days of this, I called up his care team. I was like, what's with the bird? And they're like, oh yeah, he had a bird and we fostered her out to, you know, to somebody. And I was like, can we bring the bird? And they were like, yeah, I think we can. And so we waited for a warm day. So we didn't want the little parakeet to get too shocked coming through the cold. And so we brought the bird and we set the bird up, and her name is Picasso. And boy, wasn't he just delighted, and he was comforted by the bird, and he whistled to her and she'd whistle back. And I think they were co-dependent a little bit, because whenever he left the room, the bird would be like, cheep, cheep. And so, you know, he'd be like, oh, I got to get back to the bird. And so it helped ground him here. And it seems like a small thing, but it was everything to him. So we all reflected at this memorial, just like how important the little things are. And maybe that's a good lesson for all of us, every place, but it's a great one for hospice. That's what I wanted to add.
Well, I have a question or a comment. I wonder if you could, as a volunteer there, I find that I spend almost as much time with family members as I do with the patients. And I wonder if you could talk more detail about the care that's given to families and how families, I know that COVID, you know, is making a difference with that. But in general, I mean, when I think about hospice, I think not of the patient, but the whole family. And I wonder if you could talk more about that.
Kemper,
Yeah,
before you jump into that, there's been a question, and I think this is a good, there's been a question in the chat about asking that we talk more about services in the home instead of at the residence. And this might be a good area where you can talk about both together, the residence and in home, in the context of family care.
Great. Yeah, I can do that. We can answer two questions at once. So the sort of the difference for home and the Fischer home here, if we're going to somebody's home or at their assisted living or at their skilled nursing facility, we bring, you know, we order the equipment that's needed for them, the oxygen, the bed, you know, whatever is needed as far as that goes. And then the nurse would come and do a weekly visit, and the CNA would be available for a couple of hours a day for however many days are needed. And that's just all included. And we order the medication, and all of those things would get covered in the home or at the whatever location the loved one's at. And so when we go there, we do the same assessment. You know, we include the whole family, and we check in. We're like, oh, and was there other bereavement in the family? Has somebody in the family also lost somebody else? Because we want to know these things. We want to give them support. You know, if there's a single mom with 2 kids, and, you know, she may not be able to make it, you know, very often, but we make sure that we're like, oh, how can we help out? And how can we make sure we're not in the way? Or, you know, maybe the kids are going to need some extra support themselves. And so we kind of look at the whole picture, as well as, you know, the partners and spouses, whoever are in the home as well.
Are you ready for me to read you other questions from the chat?
Sure.
So there was, you know, this question generally about talking about hospice in the home versus inpatient care. And there's also a question about, can you talk about criteria for hospice? Would just old age, not an active or life-threatening issue be a criteria?
Unfortunately, Medicare, who kind of runs a lot of like what we're allowed to include as a hospice diagnosis or not, has restricted some of the criteria for us. But often if there are some declines, like not, losing weight, basically, spending more time withdrawing, more time sleeping, less time engaging, less eating, with some weight loss. And there are some other parameters that we can kind of piece together. So we have had people who are simply just a lot older and the parts are wearing out and they don't have a very specific disease process underway, but there have been ways to get them hospice eligible.
And can you talk about, so what are those criteria for hospice? What makes
Sure.
someone hospice eligible?
Basically, that you have a disease process underway, that there are no other options for you. There are no treatment options for you. And that because of that, you're basically going to be declining, and a physician would be able to say, yeah, it's unlikely that you're going to be here after 6 months. It seems like this disease process is underway and you won't be here within some period of time that's 6 months or less. So that's sort of a general overview, but other ones might be that there might be treatment options out there, but you don't want them. Let's say you've had a cancer that you've been battling for 10 years, 15 years, whatever. And finally you're just like, I don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to, I'm done with this. I want to have quality of life and not necessarily quantity of life. And so that would make you eligible if you opted to not pursue life-sustaining treatments. Some classic ones might be, end-stage liver disease, end-stage kidney disease, lots of different cancers, various cardiac diseases, congestive heart failure, things like that. And also long-term diseases like COPD or emphysema. You can live for a long time with that and live a perfectly wonderful life. And then, but towards the end, it's like you just can't maintain anymore, even with your oxygen. So some of those things would trigger a hospice eligibility.
Kemper, when you mentioned that the Fischer home model follows a European model, and someone asked if there's a difference between a European care model and the American care model generally.
Well, I mean, that's sort of a broad brush stroke. Certainly there are models in Europe that are much better. Like basically you're taken care of from the time that you're born until the time that you die. And there isn't actually a hospice box that you have to fall into. You're just taken care of by a more universal healthcare. And then there are other models that do have an actual hospice box, but often there are some countries, let's not say often, but there are some countries that have this model of it's a team approach and you're not separated. Your cardiologist is not separated from your rheumatologist or whoever. Like they have a network that they actually communicate together with each other on a continuous basis, as opposed to the Western, or anyway, the American model, US model, where we tend to have, they're all separated and nobody knows what the other person is doing or saying or prescribing or anything.
So it's the team approach that is to care that it is different from typical American medicine.
Correct.
And someone has asked if there are pets in the house at the Fischer home.
The little parakeet was a little bit of an exception, but usually pets can visit, and we do have some service animals that come and can come around, and we certainly have had plenty of times when the family dog comes and spends the day and then they go home at night, or the cat, if the cat's up for that kind of travel
Flexibility. I'm just okay. These so I'm pulling questions out of the chat, but would the hospice staff help a person decide if they were eligible without having to go through a primary care physician?
Well, it's a yes and no, or it's a both and. Usually what we do, we have someone on the phone or someone's talking to somebody in the community, and they think they're hospice eligible, and it may sound like basically we kind of go through a little checklist, and it sounds like, yes, this is the case. We do need to have some medical data to back that up in order to defend that to Medicare. So
Right.
we would need to contact the hospital or the primary care physician. And then when we get close enough, we get a little closer, we need to have a physician who is willing to attest that you are hospice eligible and you are likely to not survive beyond 6 months.
Okay. The next question was, can a doula be part, an end-of-life doula or a death doula be part of the care team? And I'm going to field this one since that's what I do. And the answer is Medicare does not currently cover doula services through hospice. So, in that sense, no. But in my own experience, sharing clients with the Fischer home, I might have a client who's in hospice care with the Fischer home in the community, and I will, with the client's permission, communicate with the hospice team to be better coordinated. So yes, a doula can be part of that, but that the doula's time would be paid for by the family or pro bono.
Correct. Yeah, much like a midwifery service.
Right.
It does not necessarily include the doula.
Someone is asking, can family members sleep over at the Fischer home?
Yes. You're coming to visit your loved one. You can stay in the room with the loved one. There's some very comfy recliners, and we also have a cot. So people can come and visit, 24/7, stay overnight, whatever.
And is it harder to get approval from Medicare Advantage plans than traditional Medicare for approval and financial coverage?
This one is a little bit out of my wheelhouse, and I have been trying to learn about more about the insurances, but insurance companies change sometimes, even just within, a year or two. And so I can't honestly say that I know the answer to that. There certainly, we have gotten approval through Medicare Advantage before and through some other insurance companies. Sometimes what happens is that they just, if you are over 65 and enrolled in Medicare, they basically say, okay, I'm just going to let Medicare cover this. Or sometimes they might actually have their own hospice benefit. So you'd have to talk to our billings and finance specialist, Shelley Gore, and ask her about that. And with your specific plan, because sometimes it's from one plan to the next, it's different.
Okay. The next question is, what is the average length of stay in inpatient hospice like the Fischer home? And if a person is there too long, would they be asked to leave?
I don't have the statistics on hand, but it really does run from days, sometimes hours, to a year and a half or more. We have had people here on hospice, and it's not unusual. Well, it's not unheard of that when somebody gets on hospice, they improve because they're getting off a bunch of medication that makes them feel cruddy. They're not doing these invasive treatments. They've healed up from that kind of thing. They're getting the care that they need. They're getting the love and attention that they need, and people improve. And sometimes people basically graduate from hospice, and they can stay on here in the house on what we call our bridge program. It's a kind of palliative program. And we've done this number of times. And then when they do actually start to decline again and really get closer to the end of life, we just sign them back onto hospice. So we don't send anybody away unless there's some financial concerns. And then, if you're running out of money, then we would help to place you in an appropriate, secondary location. But this has happened like maybe all at one time. I can't hear you, Dina.
Myself when I'm trying to stay muted because of the traffic, but so the what this isn't really about whether people choose the residence or care at home, but one of the things that all of us notice who work close to hospice is that people often delay entering hospice care. They know it's sort of down the road for them, but they delay it until they feel like death is imminent and just a few weeks away. But the truth is that the magic of hospice care can happen a lot sooner, months before, and it can be something that you grow into. So in the beginning, you might have, for instance, if you're in your own home and you've decided with your family and your doctor and the hospice team that hospice is right for you and you sign on, in the beginning, you might not have a whole lot of contact. A volunteer might come and spend some time with you for a couple of hours so that your caregiver can go out and for a walk or go shopping or have some personal time for themselves. And this is actually one of the really important ways that hospice can support your personal care team, right? The hospice team can support your personal care team by creating these little supportive actions that give your caregiver some time so they're not so burnt out. That's what we want to do with hospice. We want to bring care to your family and support them in caring for you. And as you come closer to death, bring in some expert care. So a CNA, nursing care, you might see the social worker more often if there's more decisions your family needs help making together. If as you come closer to death, you feel more distress, the non-denominational chaplain is a really wonderful person to talk to, with a lot of experience with a lot of families dealing with these kinds of conversations around end of life. So the kinds of support that a hospice organization can bring to you is broader, I think, than, it's not just making sure you have oxygen before you die.
I'd like to jump in. We have a couple questions about volunteers.
Okay.
Oh, sure. Let me.
Okay, sorry.
No, I just I got distracted and I lost the chat. Here we go. We have a whole bunch of questions lined up.
Okay,
So,
why don't you go through them?
I think the first thing is how does one become a volunteer? And I'm going to combine it with the next question, which is, can you talk a little bit about what a volunteer would do and what kind of training they're provided?
Yeah, so our contact person is Barbara Russell. She's our volunteer coordinator. And there is an 18-hour training program that you go through. And I don't know exactly what the schedule looks like right now. I don't know when the next training program is coming up, but it's not on a rolling basis. It's at sort of like a period of time. There'll be one scheduled and then she'll complete it and then wait for there to be a number more of people wanting to do the training program and then do another training program. And it's usually in the evenings for an hour or two, and then they're just sort of stitched together and cover different topics and include the philosophy of hospice, some of the issues to think about with when people are on hospice, how their needs change, what is involved with confidentiality and privacy matters and those kinds of things. So,
well, and parameters of care in terms of what you can do as a volunteer and what you can't do as a volunteer. And they give you training in when to call for more help if you need help. And they also provide some training in the kinds of things that people on hospice might want to talk to you about.
correct. Yep. And
So
right now, we also have we have a sort of what's called an ancillary training, so that it's for people who, you know, maybe what they don't really necessarily want direct patient contact. They just, you know, they want to come in and cook a meal, or they want to be the, you know, the on-call handy person, or, you know, there's these various different other categories that do not require a full 18 hours. I can't remember what the hours are, but it's less than that. But there's still ways to volunteer and support us, even if you don't have as much time for the training, or you're not interested in direct patient contact.
right. Oh, here's an interesting question. Does the Fischer Home provide psychiatric support for people who suffer from fluctuating mental status as part of their decline?
We do not have a psychiatrist as part of the team, but we certainly would continue to consult with that person's psychiatrist, who, you know, has been with this person probably for a good long time, and would include them in that consultation to find out, like, okay, so what's worked in the past, and are we seeing a bump in the road, or is this disease process related? You know, how can we support this person through, you know, if there is a fluctuation? Or generally speaking, we do not start changing any medication that anybody is on. We would alert the psychiatrist or the therapist that they've been working with and say, this is what we're seeing. You know, they're still swallowing their pills, but at some point we're going to have a shift in what they can do and how they can take their medication. And, you know, what is the best way to approach that? What are the alternatives that we can do? And when it really comes down to it, when somebody is really reaching the end of their life, there's lots of support that we can offer them just through the hospice medications. They tend to cover a lot of different emotional and mental status changes. But certainly we would stay in consultation with whoever was part of your team.
The next question is, what is the difference between hospice? Well, some people can be on hospice care in a hospital setting. So what's the difference between hospice at the hospital and hospice at the Fischer Home? And as part of this, I'm sort of going to combine them. Do we work with people in assisted living or nursing homes as they have end of life needs? And I think those are it's good to combine.
It's not usual that we are in a hospital setting, and most hospices are not in a hospital setting. When somebody's in a hospital, there's like sort of an acute situation going on. They tend to, hospital would get the person stabilized and then would refer them out to hospice, either their hospice, and then transfer the patient to their home, and then attach the hospital-based or the hospital-associated hospice and palliative team, VNA team, or they would call us and see if we have a bed, or they would call us and say, we're discharging this person to home or to a skilled nursing facility or to an assisted living situation, and we would just pick them up there once they were discharged. There are rare circumstances where somebody is in hospice and in the hospital, and usually that has to do with unresolved symptoms. There's just something we're not able to handle in the house or in the home. We've done all of our magic, and the person is still experiencing some symptoms that are unresolved symptoms. So we would put them into the hospital under what's called GIP, general inpatient. But really, it's like maybe one person in many, many, many years do we ever have to do that. We tend to be able to get people comfortable wherever they are without having to bring them to the hospital.
Which brings up the question of if, for instance, if someone was being transferred from the hospital to the hospice of the Fischer home or wanted to be to the residence, is there a waiting list for care either in the community or in the residence?
Generally speaking, there isn't a waiting list in the community. I think there may be one time or two times that we've had to refer out to another hospice. Usually that's associated with these people being outside of our service area.
Right.
And as far as the house goes, yeah, there have been times when there is a waiting list, and what we will often do is try and work with the family to get the hospice and the extra care team at home so that the patient is comfortable until a bed comes open here.
Okay, thank you. And again, do you work with people in assisted living or nursing homes as they have end of life needs?
Yes.
And how does that work?
It's much like being at home. We do the weekly visits and however the nursing visits, and then however often a CNA is needed, and the social work will go out, and spiritual will go out. Our volunteers will go out. So that can happen at home or at an assisted living or at a skilled nursing facility. Sometimes the skilled nursing facilities have a little bit different of a dynamic because they have more of like the medications and the hospital beds, like Holyoke Soldiers Home, you know, like we go through their pharmacy. But as far as the individual patient family is concerned, we jump in the same way.
Right. So I want to add here that a person can be in a skilled nursing facility or an assisted living and also be on hospice. In their bed or in their room in that facility, hospice can come to them in the same way we would at home.
Absolutely. And we go up to like, SICA, the Center for Extended Care, the Arbors, the Lane Center, Rockbridge, Linda Manor, Holyoke Soldiers Home. So we really will show up wherever we're needed.
This is a good segue into the question about what is our service area?
Generally speaking, it's all of Hampshire County, the lower part of Franklin County, and the upper part of Hampden County. Sometimes we'll go a little further to the east or the west, but generally that's our range.
Cool. And there's this wonderful question here. Do you recommend hospice as a career path for someone just out of nursing school as opposed to a med-surg type of unit? If so, why? And secondly, do you work with the local schools and universities and offer internships where students work with a nurse in their final semester?
Yes, and all yeses. So, it has been in the past, it's not just for hospice, but it has been in the past that when students are graduating from nursing school, they kind of give, they tell you in nursing school, oh, you better go and do a year on the med-surg floor. But really this is changing. People are beginning to realize that you should just go into what you're interested in. You want to do midwifery, you want to do oncology, you want to do pediatrics, you want to do hospice, just jump in and do what you want to do. It's not as much of a important thing on your resume that you've done a year on the med-surg floor. And we do have, we've had Elms College here, we've had UMass, I believe we've had GCC. I don't know whether we've had Holyoke, but most often it's been UMass students that they'll be part of a program, a class, maybe it's a community nursing class, and then they come and do a rotation here 1 day a week for a semester. And then when people are finishing out their nursing schedule, they try and apply for an internship in the area that they're interested in. And we have had interns here. I was an intern here.
And can you talk a little bit about what it costs to stay in the residence and discuss a little, what the Medicare benefit covers and then what people would be responsible for financially?
Sure. The Medicare benefit is the same here or anywhere somebody is. And that's about, I don't know, $198.23 or currently something like that. And that's the one that Medicare just covers, and it's no charge to the family loved one. It covers all of the nursing and CNAs and equipment and medication and other consultations. The Fischer home has an additional $475 a day for the room and board that's completely separate from the Medicare insurance. Some long-term care insurances cover at least a portion of our room and board, and more people have long-term care insurance and are accessing it, and people are learning how to get that the long-term care insurance triggered sooner as opposed to waiting until the last minute. So you'd work with our billing specialist about how to navigate that.
Sorry, I was muted. Are there other questions? I think we covered all the ones I could see in the chat. And I can't really see all of your, like if you have a hand up, it's really hard for me to see because I'm on a telephone instead of a computer. But so unmute yourself and pipe up. Or maybe Kemper can see you and I can't.
I think Sandy had some questions.
No, my question's been answered.
Okay, great.
But
And
Ricky?
If one can afford the $475, that's out of pocket a day, then what happens to that person?
We try and support that person in their home or helping getting them situated at a skilled nursing facility, or basically meet you wherever you are at is how we approach it. We do have a couple of sliding scale beds that we work with family members if they've got some limited income. We have a certain number of beds and a certain number of days that we do that per year. But yeah, if there's a financial need and we can accommodate, then we have the conversation and we see what we can work out. And if somebody is here and they end up being here a lot longer than they anticipated, we also have a conversation about how to support the family and the finances. There are some options, but they're always kind of individually based, so it's hard for me to speak to that.
This is a perennial conversation of the board of how do we, so I want to be clear that $475 a day is for hospice patients in the residence, not at home. At home, you don't have to pay that. It's a room and board fee, basically. But you're dependent on a lot of care from your family. Somebody has to be there with you at home for hospice care to work. So a family member or a friend, but you need some community support there. But the board is always discussing ways for people who have need, create more space and more capacity at the Fischer home for people without those resources. And we will keep at it.
Thank you.
$198 per day Medicare would be the fee that covers your hospice folks that are in their own homes. They would not have an extra charge beyond the $198.
Right. Well, the
Medicare
$198 is covered by Medicare.
Yeah. So I guess my question around would all things being equal, and in spite of any incentives around bed vacancy, do you think people would prefer to die in their own homes? In other words, is there the pros and cons of being able to go through hospice in your own home? you know, your own sight, smells, pictures on the wall, all that kind of stuff versus going to an inpatient? What percentage of your folks are able to kind of die with dignity in their own home versus having to go into the inpatient setting? And what's the big trigger that causes that? Is it the overnight? Is it the overnight coverage issue or attention or what?
Overall, I would say it's an overall care assessment. And also a symptom assessment. If somebody is having just some unresolved symptoms at home, it's sometimes they just have to go to another facility, whether it's here or someplace else. They're just needing to have that 24/7 attention from some medical professionals. I don't know exactly what the percentage is, but
I want to pipe in here because I've had this conversation with people around, you know, what to choose. I mean, there are people who would very much prefer to die at home. You know, there are people who would very much feel safer at end of life in some sort of facility, either because they want their family to have better support. You know, they don't want their partner or spouse or children to take care of the nitty-gritty of their care, and that feels intense for them. Other people and other families really want to do those parts, want to be hands-on, want to be right there. So, you know, there's really a range. We're very happy that, so there's 9 beds right now. Am I right about that, Kemper? There's 9 beds at the Fischer home. We're very, very happy to be able to offer this resource to the community. There aren't that many residential hospice facilities in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and I would guess probably none quite as sweet as ours. I'm a little biased. The other thing that's important to think about when you're making a decision about whether you want to be at home in hospice care or in a facility in hospice care is really having a conversation with your care team, your family care team, whether it's chosen family or biological family, about what people are really up to. And I can tell you that the hospice nurse and the social worker are phenomenal resources for you. In facilitating this conversation and asking people's questions and asking the tough questions about care, bodily fluids and toileting care. There's all sorts of things that are kind of frank that people need to have conversations about. And sometimes someone, like I said earlier, someone might start at home, and as Kemper was saying, their care becomes more complex, and either for a period of time or through to the end of their life, the residence makes more sense.
Ina, could I also comment?
Oh, please.
Sometimes things happen to the caregivers.
That's true
Somebody
too.
has a stroke, or they break a hip, or, you know, all of a sudden that system that someone had at home is no longer able to fill the bill.
Right.
So how lucky are we to have a residential program in our community that can be an option for people short-term or long-term? And the other thing, as you alluded, Dina, not all families have the fortitude, either the physical or the psychological or the spiritual fortitude to see their loved one through this process. And although the loved one might want to be at home, it's really tearing the family apart to try to do it. So
yes.
it's
Another,
it's not a failure on the part of the biologic or chosen family. It's
not a failure at all. It's just hard.
It's
Yeah.
really hard.
We have had quite a few circumstances where people were at home, they wanted to stay at home, but it just, you know, something happened to the care team. Or there was a symptom that was just not getting taken care of, and they can come into the Fischer home. You're on hospice with us in the community. You have a 5-night, 6-day, you know, respite that you can come and stay here without being charged the room and board, to help give the caregiver the break or to help resolve the symptom and then return to home after whatever the issue is that gets resolved. Either it's, for care or for symptoms. And sometimes people come and they actually just, stay with us for a month until the apartment gets finished that's getting attached to the daughter's house or whatever. Or the plumbing, something happened with the electrics and so they can't be there right now, but then they go back to home. So we try as best as we can to fill those gaps and to support the family in what their goals are. If their goals are to go back home, we do the best we can.
Right.
I would also like to just add that a big part of something great of the Fischer home is that it doesn't really feel like you're at some nursing facility or something like that. You have the opportunity to bring your whole apartment with you if you can fit it. So it really gives, residents an opportunity to have that familiarity if there is a challenge, in making that decision to stay home or to come into our home. So it really can, the Fischer home is so accommodating to any family and any need that they might have. So it's really great.
I'd like to jump in on what this kind of build a little bit on what Ashley said, is that over the years that I've been there, one of the things that I do as a volunteer is, Ashley is correct that the residents move all of their family pictures, they move memorabilia and sort of objects that they prize into the room. And as a volunteer, when I go into that room, I really do feel like I'm in that person's home. And one of the things that works best as a volunteer is just to have the residents talk about pictures of their grandchildren, of their spouses that are up on the wall. And I can't tell you how many wonderful conversations I've had with residents because they've made it their home. And it's like I'm visiting them and learning about them. And that really is a very powerful experience for both the volunteer and for the resident.
Yeah, I agree. So the other comment here from Mary Young is that we know the elder population is growing and will continue to be growing. And we also know that an increasing percentage of these elders live alone. And how can our organization, the Fischer Home Organization, plan for meeting this need? I want to say to you folks from Amherst Neighbors, this is how. I'm part of Village Neighbors, which is Shutesbury, Leverett, Wendell, and New Salem. You have Amherst Neighbors. So we can, as the Fischer Home, increase our capacity in the community, but for those people living alone, organizations like Village Neighbors are really essential to create support. So because if someone may be willing to make an arrangement with an elder to be their caregiver, an elder who's living alone, and to be present for them, but may not be able to take on all of that person's needs, like rides to appointments or shopping, or other things that an organization like Amherst Neighbors can really fill in for. And I think what we're seeing around the Valley and nationally is this awareness that we have an aging population, that people want to stay at home, and that our families need our communities to be aging friendly.
Okay, I think we can take maybe like one or two more questions and it's almost time to end. So
it is.
Yeah. Anybody have any final questions?
Looks like Tricky does.
I just have one comment. I had checked out the Fischer home for my mother when they said that, she was at the end of life. And at that time, I called, you didn't have any openings, and I was told to call back the next day to see if, if she could be moved that day. Well, she died that morning. She passed that morning. But what you guys provided me afterwards was so much, I don't know how to explain it, but that you have a grief support group, and you kind of embraced me through that. And I would like to thank you guys for that because, you know, given what had happened, I was very unnerved by the whole thing.
Yeah.
But she had said that she was going to die in the hospital, and that's what she did. But you guys picked me up after that, and I'd like to thank you guys for that. And I think people should know that when you say you work with families, you really do. Thank you very much.
I'm so glad you had that
You're
support.
welcome.
And it's
Well,
such an important point about what the Fischer Home can do, because the bereavement and support groups are there for the community. And your person didn't have to die in Fischer Home care for that resource to be available to you. And if you're struggling, you should give us a ring.
Well, I want to
Yeah.
thank you.
I
Yeah.
think
Can I
just
just
double,
add
did Phyllis,
One more thing.
Phyllis have a question? Or no? Okay. Never mind.
I just
Oh.
want to add also that I really respect the work that you all you know, that the neighbors organizations do, and the Amherst neighbors. And it really does, we need to know about each other, right? And we need to support each other. And one of our goals is that to be able to have, you know, more of these sliding scale beds available. And I just want to direct you to that. We do have fundraisers at least a couple of times a year. We've got a golf tournament and we have Casino Royale, and please, you know, join us, you know, bring your energy, and, you know, try and support the Fischer Home as much as we would like to support you as well. And remember you when we're working with families, so that we can say, oh yes, please call these people. They might be able to help you out.
The Fischer Home also has a new Facebook page for caregiver support. It's
Oh,
called Walking Each Other Home. And it is a public page. Anyone can go there. And there's wonderful resources, local and less local, for supporting people who are in caregiving roles. And there's even a little article about 5 easy access walks you can take around the valley, so you can get out and have some beauty. And I invite you to, you don't have to be a Fischer Home family to enjoy that page. It's called Walking Each Other Home.
Sure. And even if you don't have Facebook, you can still access that group by just visiting our website, fischerhome.org. There's a link to it right on our homepage, as well as information about our upcoming events and ways to join our mailing list and things like that. So thank you all so much for being here today. It was great connecting with you all.
yeah. And I
Really
think
a delight.
yeah, it's wonderful that the Amherst neighbors and the Hospice, the Fischer Home, are kind of forging this relationship. And I think there are many other links, you know, within the community that we need to strengthen. And I feel like we're really off to a great beginning here, and we're really meeting the needs of the people in the valley.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
thank you very much. That was very informative. And I knew a lot about the Fischer Home before we started. Well, thank you very much.
Delightful to spend time with all of you. Thank you.
Yes, same here.
Absolutely.
Thank you.